Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Project Unicorn and CETA webinar with the fabulous team from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. This is part of our Great Data States series, and we are so excited to have some awesome folks from CETA and Wisconsin to share with you the terrific work that they are doing leveraging interoperability and their EdFi infrastructure in the great state of Wisconsin. Can you go to the next slide, Christina? As I mentioned, this webinar is a joint presentation of Project Unicorn, which is a nonprofit initiative of Innovate EDU. It's a nationwide coalition of organizations dedicated to supporting and promoting the use of data interoperability in the K-12 space. And the fabulous State Education Technology Directors Association. And I'm sure many of the folks on the webinar today are familiar with this terrific group. And as I mentioned, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. So we're thrilled to have everyone here. Next slide. Okay, and just to start us off with a basic definition of interoperability. Interoperability is the seamless, secure, and controlled exchange of data between applications. So just as someone recently shared an analogy that I found really helpful if you're new to the concepts of interoperability. Interoperable data systems, or I should say non-interoperable data systems, are like working with Legos and Lincoln Logs and trying to put something together. Now, Christina has a fabulous necklace on today that's made out of Legos. Now, if I had some Lincoln Logs and I were trying to build something with Legos and Lincoln Logs, it wouldn't work very well together because they're different systems. They're designed to work with other pieces within those systems. And it's the same way with data systems. What interoperable data standards do is basically they make sure that Legos and Lincoln Logs, you don't have that conundrum. They're actually all part of the same system. Data is stored in part of the same system so that you can easily interchange data between systems and applications and use that data to solve all kinds of educational challenges as we're going to learn in our webinar today. Next slide, Christina. Before we get started, I just wanted to encourage everyone on the call today, if you have not already, please consider signing the Project Unicorn Pledge. So basically, the pledge is designed for districts to be able to sign the pledge and just acknowledging that they are making a commitment to move towards utilizing interoperable data systems in their districts. And when you are a pledge signatory, you get lots of benefits. You get added to the Project Unicorn newsletter distribution list. You get notified of special offers from Project Unicorn partners. And the link to sign the pledge has been popped up in the chat. You'll see that throughout the presentation. When we have links to share, we will add those and they'll pop up in the lower left-hand corner of their screen. So I hope that you will consider, if you're not already a pledge signatory, we'd love to have you join our community, and there's no cost or anything to join. Next slide. And one more thing, we would like to also warmly invite you to take the Project Unicorn School System Data Survey. This is the first ever survey of LEAs and SEAs across the country to find out where districts stand in terms of their preparation for interoperable data systems. And we want your voice to be counted because the data from this survey is going to be used to develop technical assistance and a state of the sector report that we will be publishing this fall. So we would love for you to fill out the survey. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete. And if you finish the survey, you will receive an email with a link to an online gift card from Amazon.com or Donors Choose. So be sure to take the Project Unicorn School System Data Survey. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn things over to our fabulous moderator for today's discussion, Christina Ishmael. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here with us today. For those on the East Coast, happy lunch hour. For those of us in the central part of the country, good morning still. Or here on the West Coast, same thing. My name is Christina Ishmael, and I am so happy to be here with you all, serving as our facilitator for our time together. We wanted to approach this a little different than a normal webinar. And so that is exactly what we're going to do. We are going to look at what Wisconsin has been able to do as far as their interoperability, but we're not necessarily going to have a panel. We're going to do more of a fishbowl. And what I mean by that is that we're going to hear from our folks in Wisconsin, just talking through their whole project and their work and what they've been able to accomplish, and then how they've worked with school districts to kind of implement and execute. And then we'll go into a facilitated question and answer session. We have a couple of questions that have already been pre-populated, and then we will open it up to folks that are joining us here to ask the presenters their own questions. And then we'll, of course, wrap up there towards the end of the hour. So thanks again for being here. We really appreciate it. So for the purposes of our time together, our community agreements are please stay engaged, speak your truth, experience discomfort. I don't think we'll be experiencing too much discomfort in this. However, it may be a new topic for you and you're like, I have a lot of questions here. So please feel free to contribute those in the chat. And then providing equity of voice, we have a lot of folks that will be joining us, and we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask their question. And then because it is a finite period of time, expect and accept a lack of closure, but know that you can always reach out to all of us afterwards to have some follow-up conversations if that is something that you choose to do. So thank you again for being here. We also want to make sure that we thank the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation for their generous support and funding of this project, not only for CETA, but for Project Unicorn, and then making this all possible so that we can actually hear from folks that are doing this work and learn from them, that we could potentially replicate this and scale this within our own states or systems. So I represent CETA, the State EdTech Directors Association, as someone that's stepped into special projects to work with the team there. Former CETA member myself when I was the digital learning specialist at the state of Nebraska. And you'll get a little teaser that we're gonna have Nebraska join us for our next session. But it's been like reuniting with a family. And one of the projects that I get to do is this one on data modernization and future readiness. And the goal of this grant that the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation funded is to really leverage the national network of CETA to empower state ed tech directors and digital learning directors to identify and implement specific ways that they can use their purchasing power to increase vendor adoption of state standards that will hopefully ensure that we can leverage that buying power or authority kind of agency that we have at the state level to hopefully help implement things like data standardization and interoperability, not only at the state, but then that would hopefully flow down to our local school level. So we are joined today by our folks with Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, Daniel Retzlaff and Melissa Straw. Thank you both so much for being here and for being willing to share your own experiences and your story. And I'm going to let you all take it away.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
I'm Dan Retzlaff, the Director of Applications Development for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. Just a little bit about DPI. Again, we're the state agency charged of K-12 education for the state of Wisconsin. And specifically, my team in the IT area, applications development, we have are separated out into numerous different Scrum teams that create data systems and applications for not only needs within the agency and reporting needs, but also we develop applications for school districts and LEAs to provide value where we can. I just wanted to say I think you did a great job putting that graphic together that had some cool Wisconsin stuff in there. You had in there, I don't know if you caught the forward part, but forward is something that Wisconsin strives on. It's kind of the official state motto to be a national leader in all that we do. So we hope that we can continue to be a leader in all things interoperability by talking about some of the projects we've done, we're working on, and what we hope to get to in the future. With that, I'll pass it on to Melissa.
Straw. I'm the director of the data warehouse and decision support team here at DPI. I'm also in the IT area like Dan, and my team is in charge of pretty much all of the reporting needs for the agency. So we take all of the data that is flowing through WISE data that Dan's team works on, and we load it to the data warehouse, and then we publish it on a public portal for stakeholder reporting, a secure portal back to districts to use for continuous improvement planning, early warning, and data quality review. We also are in charge of the federal EdVax reporting, any of the state required reporting, and facilitating ad hoc data exchanges, research, and any other data needs from the departments. Thanks for having us today. I'm going to put some links in the chat to the WISE-Dash specific web pages and our public portal site as well.
Thanks, Melissa. So I think the first question that was laid out was, what was the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And I guess the story here is I started working for DPI in 2011, so time's really gone by fast. I can't believe it's been 10 years already. And not long after I was here, well, coming in, Melissa's team had already worked on standing up a statewide longitudinal data system in the warehousing area and creating public reporting and secure reporting for school districts. But the mechanisms to gather the data was of legacy applications and very inefficient. And, one of the things that hit me at first was just going around and talking to different districts and LEAs to say, hey, I'm new here to DPI. We're starting to prioritize our projects. What are your pain points? And I quickly found out many pain points that were within the districts. And my goal was that, hopefully in 5 or 6 years from now, or even sooner, when we go around and we talk to districts, it's like, oh, DPI isn't here instead of DPI is here. So, so it was alarming to me, just the process flow that we required of our staff and our LEAs to do state and federal reporting requirements. And everything with legacy systems is the old-fashioned file upload and download, right? Think of yourself as a larger district. You're uploading a file to say, here's all the data I need to give to the state for this reporting deadline. And I'm doing everything I can to get this deadline met, and I upload all this information. And then it takes up to 8 hours to process that data. And then the next day after that data is processed overnight, I find out I've got 3,000 errors I need to fix. And I'm running low on time, and I need to do another upload. That's going to take another 8 hours until I get it all the way down, right? That's very stressful to our schools. So that is a couple issues there. Number one is the lot of manual workflows. Another problem is the inconsistency and bad data quality. Right? Is this true source data coming from a student information system from an LEA, or is it something that's just being put in a spreadsheet in order to meet the needs so that a file can be validated and be set so that it's accepted by the state? And a couple other things are inefficiencies, in such as if you're reporting data, say in fall, for the big thing for us is you have to have your data captured as of the 3rd September of Friday, which is very important for a lot of different count dates and things that we have. And some of that reporting actually, that goes back to the previous school year. So you're in the fall, your school districts are working on reporting, and then they're going back to their student information system and resetting their system to go back to a school year, and then having to pull information out of that school year. Just very inefficient, very hard to do. So it was the first thought was, hey, Wisconsin could do a statewide student information system implementation, and all the data would come in through one means, and that should solve a lot of these problems before we have to rebuild or do something with these legacy data collection systems that we have. Long story short, that project was defunded or canceled, and that's when my boss came to me one day and he said, you weren't part of this project, but you're part of it now, and this didn't work, and I need you to figure something else out. So that put us on the pathway
From the
of going, oh
reporting
boy, okay,
side.
what do we do, right? The systems that we've had in place have been in place for years. Knocking over one system and starting a new one or doing modernization efforts was a huge task. But even before we started thinking about that, we thought, well, all of our databases and all of our data modeling is just custom to us here in Wisconsin. And are we really going to build a new one that's custom to us? There's got to be, what are other states doing? There's got to be something like this. So we just started going out on trying to find any contact information from other states, and we wanted to know what state is set up like we are, right? How many development staff do you have? Are you going out and are you doing procurement and having someone else come and do the status system for your state? And when based on that work that we've done, we found out that there was one state in particular that aligned pretty close to our efforts, and that was Arizona and also Tennessee. And through discussions with them, we found out about EdFi and the different modeling frameworks, the data model that you have through EdFi. And along with that, we also looked at different model frameworks like SIF. We looked a little bit at IMS Global, but nothing there was checking all the boxes for us. And the key thing for us at the time was the API was just about to be released as a valid option. So not only then are you talking a logical data model, but you're talking a physical data model. And once EdFi made that as a open source piece platform, we signed the license with EdFi and we jumped on it right away. And within a sandbox environment, we had something up and running within a couple days, believe it or not. We were able to accept data. So we've been committed to EdFi ever since. But selfishly at that time, it was very focused just on what we needed to do for state and federal reporting purposes. And what we've done since that time is we've started out very small and collecting things like enrollment data. And then every year we kept adding on to the data that we're collecting through the EdFi API and going into our ODS, which then feeds into the data warehouse. And I would say now we're to a point where a lot of the state and federal reporting information is coming in via the EdFi API through an LEA student information system. There's no more file uploads going on. There's no more spreadsheets going on. There's no more, the time to correct errors has been shortened drastically based on what it was. Right now, a school district can go and say, I'm going to make a change to this record. If their vendor is set up to handle real-time execution, that data goes to the state right away. They can then trigger to do manual processing of rule validation, and then within sometimes 5 to 15 minutes, they've got a whole brand new report, and they just keep doing that cycle until everything is good to go. And a lot of new best practices have started from that. In other words, you're not worrying so much about getting all your state and data in on time at this certain time frame and dealing with all those errors at that time. Instead, it becomes a norm where schools are setting up like, hey, every Thursday and Tuesday in the mornings, we're going to look to see what kind of errors we have out there. We're going to fix those and we're going to clean it up. And then what do we learn from those errors? How do we work with our student information system vendor? And how do we put data in correctly and change protocols within our own LEA to make sure that error doesn't happen again? So what you're seeing over time is you're seeing error rates on the decline, which is improving data quality, right? So that's been a great thing to see, but that's been very much focused on kind of our selfish need from a statewide agency perspective. But now we're kind of turning the corner and we're saying, hey, interoperability, we've got an engine built based on EdFi right now. Why are we only doing this just for state and federal reporting purposes? How can we help out? We've got, in other words, how do we take advantage of and scale out a statewide infrastructure that we now have in place? And that's really some of our latest projects that we've been working on. It's been really exciting because we're really helping out in other areas just for, you need to do this because there's a law that says you need to. Now we say, hey, we can help you and provide value in these different ways. So.
back with the older outdated systems, we would get data once a year and we would publish that. And while that was great and we were able to provide trend data to LEAs and publish that on the public portal, there's so many limitations when you only get data once a year. And with the EdFi API and the WISE data collection, we are now able to load data nightly and have a current data set continuously flowing into the data warehouse to be used for, not daily in most cases, but looking at your data more frequently and looking at that data for continuous improvement planning in addition to the trend data over time. So it really has increased what we can give back to LEAs for data analysis, what they can use the data for, and it has also provided that statewide because we have a lot of smaller school districts in Wisconsin that really can't build their own data dashboards and data tools or their own capacity for data analysis. So we've been able to roll that out statewide and promote the data flow and getting your data in and corrected as frequently as possible so that you can use the data daily in your districts for the early warning and the improvement planning. We also have the data quality dashboards to help them with their data quality pieces as well, so that they can look at that data more frequently than annually. And it has really helped out with student improvement planning and the different things that they work on in the district. So that's been a great benefit as well with adding the EdFi solution and the API and the continuous data flow. From a data quality perspective, as Dan mentioned, we've seen a significant increase in data quality. Our largest school district in our state has told us multiple times that their data has never been better in their local systems, which has helped with their own local analysis and making sure that data for each of their students is correct and up to date in their systems. This year, we have a data snapshot, which we take annually. So we have the data continuously flowing, and then we take a snapshot once a year for all of the required reporting. For that snapshot this year, even with the pandemic, our largest school district had such a small number of errors because of the processes and procedures and process improvement they have done at the local level with the products that we've given them, so that they have really good data quality now and have really been impressed with these products and have, thanked DPI for doing all of this work to help them at the local level as well.
Yep. And just to kind of give you a little bit of idea about the scale of the data that's coming in. So, this data I have here might be a little bit old, but in the neighborhood, we've got around 424 districts or LEAs, which comes to about, 2,000 some public schools. We're working with different agency types. So in other words, not just LEAs, but we're working with what we call CISAs, or what's known in other states as regional service networks. We have 12 of those, independent charter schools, and also private choice school programs. So altogether, you're talking around close to 900,000 students statewide that we're receiving information on, and 100,000 educators. So yeah, our largest city is the city of Milwaukee, is where most data is coming in from, and I think it's Madison, Green Bay would be the second one. So, so a lot of data coming in. When it comes up to about snapshot time, we're processing up to like 1.4 billion transactions a day. Then that really scales up around the snapshot time. So. Why are we getting so many of those transactions? They shouldn't. In the future, right, one of the issues we're working on right now is that a lot of those calls aren't always necessary. So we're working with vendors to figure out how to be good stewards of resources and not maybe make the same call over numerous times, which is not needed. That's probably why our calls are so high, and we're working on bringing that down. But we are able to scale up. So. Okay.
This is all so helpful. Is there anything else that you all want to address before I jump into a ton of questions?
Sure. I guess the one thing I'd like to talk about real quick is just kind of, I talked about where we've been and the focus on state and federal reporting and where we are now and where we're going. And a lot of that has to do with taking advantage of the system architecture we now have in place at a statewide level and scaling what that means. So just want to talk about a few projects that we've got going on right now. We've gone out and we've talked to LEAs, and that's the key, is just keep getting out there and talking to LEAs and getting feedback from them. And when we hear things about like, well, I have to take data from here and then I have to put it into this system, and then it becomes outdated and I got to put it back into this system, and then I got to go to this system and pull it down, and then I have my own little process to bring it all back together. You kind of start scratching your head and you're like, everything you're talking about we have right now. Let's tell us who your vendors are that you're working with on these applications, and let's start getting the ball rolling and see if we can get an interoperability project going here. So we have a lot of these different ideas out there right now, and then we go after each one, but we also need vendor engagement. So some of the stuff doesn't always stick, some of the things do stick. And then we focus our effort and prioritize on the things that are sticking. So what are some of those things that are sticking right now? One example is we are working with the company called Zello, which does our statewide ACT career planning modules, and we have them on state contract. So we integrate with them through our EdFi interoperable system so that they can, number one, provision student record information. So they would already know all the students in a certain school or district, and there's not a separate provisioning method that has to be done within the school. And then the second thing is if a student moves around from a different district to another district, that information then in the Zello stays with that student, because we have a student ID at the statewide level. And then when we know that they've gone to a different school, they can connect to our system and bring that data over, and they don't have to create a whole new profile and account and go through everything that they've gone through at the last school. So that's one example. Another example is we're working with our assessment vendors, both local and statewide assessment vendors, right? So we're working right now with ACT, and we're doing different runs right now, and the idea is that we can do real-time data exchange with them, and it goes two different ways of importance here. So number one, we've been pulling out of our systems one-time big file load to them to get all student data into ACT, so when a student sits down, they're ready to go. But what happens? There's a lag there. Students move around, they sit down, they take their tests, they can't get in. So then there's a phone call that has to happen to the district office. The district office has to call up ACT, they have to update their information, so on and so forth. What we can do is provide ACT and say, hey, here's the data, come get it anytime. We're doing it through the enrollment API in EdFi. And the goal is that they can pull that data in. If there's any changes of the enrollment data for a student, that is up to date and reflective. So when a student sits down to take their test, they can get in and everything's all good to go. That's the part we're really working on right now, is that rostering piece is what we call it. The second thing that we'll be then attacking is pulling down the assessment results into our ODS system, which then can be automatically pulled down from a school's student information system or any other assessment software that they want. Right now, it's a separate manual download, and that school has to figure out how to process that data from there. So we're very close to getting that piece in. And I think it's this next year we're going to be doing some pilot running of this ACT connection, and some of the samples we've run in a test environment are looking very positive there. So a great engagement through ACT. We also have a statewide exam, the Wisconsin Forward exam, through a company called DRC, and we're in conversations with them too to do the same type of thing that we're doing with ACT. So that's the assessment piece, informative assessment, or at the statewide level. The other assessment pieces we're looking at is, more ability at the local level, where you want to see how a student is making improvement on things. So one product we've created is called Smart Teach, or we also call it the Classroom Data Tool. And all it basically does is it tracks progress on kind of like an assessment wall, right? It gives you a visual of an assessment wall for a teacher. And the teacher can go in on a device and say, give me all the students from this class which I teach, and they're able to see that class because we're pulling it from the EdFi API at the statewide level. So all those students come down, and then it aligns to our statewide learning standards. And then they can say if they're being proficient, if they need help. They have different array of events that they can choose, and then they can track that over time to see if whatever learning intervention method they're using is working or not. Right now, we're working with our CISA 1 regional service network, which is mainly located out of the Milwaukee area, and we have a select piloted group of teachers and schools that are using that right now and giving us feedback on that. And what we're hearing is that just that connection is just invaluable, having that connection right there. So eventually we'll be pushing those results back into the ODS, and that can be used for other reporting purposes as well. And then, yep.
It's really big for the data warehouse too, because right now we get annual files from each of the statewide assessment vendors, and we have a few connections with our local assessment vendors like MAP or STAR or PALS, and we have to set up very specific file downloads, connections. It's different for each vendor. We have to take that time and load the data sets for then the statewide reporting. And with the EdFi API connectivity piece, all of the vendors will be using the same connections to load that data to EdFi. And then not only will it flow back to the SIS if the districts want to do that, but it'll be pushed up to the data warehouse. So that will save time and effort on the data warehouse side and reporting as well. So it's a great project from many aspects.
Yep. And then the last one I'll talk about real quick about our interoperability piece here is we're creating a product called Wise Roster that is actually piloted right now and used by a few school districts, smaller school districts in Wisconsin. And what this is doing is it's connecting the statewide roster data for a school to sync to Google Classroom. So same idea, you can pick if you're a teacher, you can pick your section and class, and then it'll do an initial sync and pull down all the student records and populate that data for your Google Classroom.
And I'd also like to add one. This year, we worked with our migrant student vendor, MIS 2000. Before, we had a different vendor in Wisconsin, and they had flat files, and we couldn't connect it with our systems. And what we had to do was still collect migrant student information from the school districts when they didn't necessarily have that connection to our statewide system that actually certified the students as being migrants. So they would send us the student flags for that snapshot we mentioned, but the data quality was very low because it did not connect to the actual system of record. So with MIS 2000, when we started working with this new vendor, they were able to connect to the EdFi API. So we stopped collecting that information from the school districts. It's something we don't need from them because we have it at the state level. Stopped collecting from them. They no longer have to spend time on sending that data to us or doing the data quality. We don't have to spend time looking at the data quality and calling them and being like, are you sure this is correct? We need you to resubmit, because we are now getting it directly from the source, and it flows in through the API and the ODS and then up to the data warehouse for reporting. So it's a data element that we're getting directly from the source now, and it has saved time and effort across the state. It has been a really good project to work on with that vendor this year. We'll also be working on sending them more information from EdFi, because there are the national reporting standards that we need to do for the migrant students. So we'll be working with them on that as well. Dan, did we also want to mention the immunization project?
Oh, I can't believe we forgot that one. Okay, yes, that's the one we're receiving the most praise on right now from our school districts and time savings. So I'm sure you already know that in the school district there are requirements that schools have to collect immunization data on students, and there's certain immunization records that they need to track down if they have that or not, and it's state law, right? And a lot of that work would go to a school nurse, and the school nurse would have to log into our Department of Health and Human Services agency website, and they have an application where they can do a search and pull down these records, and then they will manually either enter that data into the student information system, or it gets processed along the line somewhere within the school district. But it's a very manual process. And we have been told that it takes days, especially along registration time at the beginning of a school year. So what we've been able to do is we've been able to partner with our Department of Health and Services agency and say, hey, we have all of the roster data, we have all the students. Would you be able to open up your system so that we can, through service calls, do searches and then pull down that data on behalf of the school district? So instead of a nurse going in manually typing in each student, what we've been able to do is, by working with them and making our systems connect, again through Ed5, we've been able to pull down all the immunization data. Now, we don't even store it in our ODS. We don't want that data. We're simply creating a tunnel to exchange the data, right? So it goes straight down to student information system. They have that data now. And the schools that are telling us this are saying, you know, you have no idea how much time you're saving by just doing this piece alone. And now with, you know, the pandemic, this same system is going to be recording if there's you know, immunization records for the COVID vaccine. So now this is another tool that schools can have. So in case there's an example of, you know, there's an exposure, and you know, based on what that local school district's protocol is on if someone tested positive, a student tested positive, what is their protocol? And if their protocol is we need to figure out who was in contact, and then we need to, you know, quarantine those students, they could simply go into their student information system now and pull up to see who's been vaccinated or not, and things like that, and choose how they want to perform their protocols locally with that data. So. Mhm.
I have a couple of questions that I mean, I've been jotting down. I have like 6 more that I have added since you all started. But to get started, so thinking about, you know, obviously you're coming from the state level, working with your districts or your LEAs. Talk about how you have been able to work on implementation and provide technical assistance or any sort of training. What has that looked like?
I would say that we do a couple things, right? So we have like ongoing monthly user group meetings that all of our users can log into and ask questions. We give them the latest updates. There's a lot of discussion on how to resolve business rules and correct errors and things like that, talk around snapshots. So that's working directly with our user base in the school districts. And then also we put out a lot of information to say, hey, you know, as a school district, please tell us who your vendors are and what you're using them for. And
Yep.
if there's a potential here to make a connection and do some interoperable work, you need to really promote to your vendor to get involved in this. Now, we have some teeth as far as the state and federal reporting is concerned, because we say in our state, but I think it's like a state law that we have that says you have to have an interoperable system for
Okay.
your student data, your student information system. So we have some teeth there for that. But all these other projects are add-on services. You don't have to do this. You know, if you don't want to use the registration for immunization, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
It's there. Obviously, everybody wants it, but we're not requiring you to use it. It's an added-on service if you want to use it. You're already sending us the data, so why not use it? So from there, it's then, you know, connecting to those vendors. Another example is exchanging special ed data back and forth to maybe a vendor that's specific for building IEPs.
Mm-hmm.
So then, you know, we say, hey, tell your vendor to get in contact with us, and then we get in contact with them, and then we start talking through spec and things like that. We encourage them to get certified as an Ed5 vendor. That's a great first step. And then we actually have our own program where we certify vendors, and it's not just you're certified or not, it's what domain do you want to certify in? Are you like a full-fledged student information system? Are you only going to read information for exchanging roster data? Or is this something where it's like, you know, dealing with special ed data where there's some specific data coming up or down from that? So what we do then is we go through a series with them and do some test results. We actually have them send some live simulation. We make sure the data is landing in the right spot. And then when all systems go, we provide them a access token that their system can then connect to ours on behalf of the school district. And also I want to mention too that we have a mechanism in place that is all built around the security piece. So in order to exchange data back and forth on behalf of a school district, not only does a vendor have to be certified and we say, yes, this vendor can exchange data with us, but a school district has to go in and authorize to say, I'm going to allow this vendor to exchange data to the state on our behalf. And that's how we make
Okay.
that connection work.
Okay,
So if a
so that
school
actually
district,
answers Rob's question that he put in the chat. Sorry. To what extent can third parties access this
correct.
data?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So they have to be certified, EdFi certified, and what were the other requirements?
Well, we recommend EdFi certification,
Okay.
especially for like say a student information system.
Of course.
But let's say we're just dealing with a local assessment company that is just really wants to tie into roster data. Well,
Yeah.
that would be overkill then. So then we just work with them on that piece, and we do a Wisconsin certification. So, but
Okay.
everyone has to get the Wisconsin certification. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. The next question I have is messaging. How, like, I worked at a state, and it's kind of one of those responses where it's like, oh, the Department of Ed is here. So thinking about that, like, how do you message this to state, or excuse me, to schools that this is actually going to help them in the long run?
Well, I think it takes time to build the trust up,
Of course.
and you really need to listen and do different exercises, like it's different, UX exercises to help prioritize the needs. And then what we do is we have an annual data conference where we go over all of the new updates. We have, 101 trainings for all the school districts out there and their users. And one of the big things we do every year was you asked, this is how we responded.
Okay.
And the top asks from a year ago are now done. And those meetings drive a lot of the different feature requests that we do each year. So I think if you see that over time, people start realizing actually they are listening to us, and can't do everything, but they're knocking off some big things that are making our lives easier.
Yeah. You've already kind of addressed this, but what have been, as far as like, what was the problem? You identified the problem, the legacy systems, SLDS has really got started in the early 2000s with the first round of funding. I know that was all kind of staggered depending on the states that applied for it, but I'm curious, like, what have been some of the challenges that you have faced in thinking about all of this? Has it been on the vendor side? Has it been on the school district side? Like, or none of that, and it's been more internal? What can you talk us through that?
I would say both vendor side and LEA side getting started. We had some challenges to get through because it was a completely different way of thinking about how we're doing this, right?
Yeah.
On the vendor side, getting vendors to work with us on this, right? It takes time and commitment from a vendor to do this, and to show actually we really think you're going to see benefit from this as well. And that was a hard sell at first, and starting out small was the key, right? Starting out small was the key there, and then people start to see the value of it. So the vendor in a lot of our cases would get pressured from us, but then their main customer is the school district. So we're telling the LEAs, if you really want this, it's really up to you to tell your school district, this is what you need. It's your vendor. So then you start seeing things like when procurements go out for new purchases, all of a sudden you'll see in those procurement documents must be EdFi, integration capabilities and things like that. So that was really kind of the turning point there. Also, one of the student information system vendors talked to me at one of the EdFi conferences once and said, we're actually saving a ton of money doing this because we're not doing custom implementations so much anymore for all these different states. Between Wisconsin, these other states, we have a foundation now, and we've really cut down the amount of time it takes to develop statewide specifications for the federal reporting purposes. So, vendors are starting to see the value in this, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the vendor side was a challenge. Melissa might have more information on this, but the LEA side was just, like I said, the change of process. So the idea of doing a snapshot, right? Before we would say, okay, everybody get your data in,
Yep.
and one district could hold up the entire state, which pushed deadlines back or made
Exactly.
things very tough to do.
Melissa's like,
And,
been there, done that.
and it,
Yes, and I think there was one
yeah,
year we waited on one district for 2 months, and
Ooh.
we weren't able to lock. That's the term we used back then, lock the
Yep.
collection. So yeah, what Dan was talking about is exactly what I was thinking about. That took some time, maybe the first 2 years where it was, we've got the snapshot. You need to do your data quality and prep work before, because once we take that snapshot, it's the entire state and it's done. Because before it would be, nah, we're not done yet. No, I still need to sign off. No, I need to work on data quality issues. They really have come a long way in understanding the process and appreciating it. And we do give them a lot of support prior to Snapshot. Dan mentioned some of the things that we do throughout the year, but prior to Snapshot, we really ramped that up as far as communications and being able to have the user groups and things like that. So they really understand it. Sure, we still have a district or two, but given how many we have, that's really good. Where they're like, whoa, I forgot about it, or I didn't get my data in time. So we do
Yeah.
have a data errata process where they can send in a note saying, I didn't report my enrollment correctly, and we won't change the certified snapshot, but we will link it up to our certified reporting so people know that there is an edit post collection. But with EdFi, they're able to continuously correct and submit, so it's ready for the next snapshot and better and corrected in the source, even though that certified reporting for that particular year isn't going to be changed. So, gosh, and Dan, when you started talking about that, that came to my mind exactly.
yeah, I guess, being proactive on Snapshot was the huge change in philosophy here, right? Instead of waiting and then dealing with things after the fact, being proactive. So doing things like, hey, Snapshot is a month away. This is where you're at right now. Okay, we're 3 weeks away. You still
Yep.
have these many errors. It's not going down. And then starting to hit all those people at higher up in our agency and also the high up in the LEAs so that when Snapshot comes, there's no surprise.
Of course. Okay. And Dan, you mentioned this when you first started talking through it. You chose EdFi because it checked the boxes. Of course, I was really excited when I heard that it was open source. I know that there are multiple sets of standards, but can you tell us how you all came to a decision to move forward with EdFi?
Well, yeah, I mean, just kind of the same thing that you brought up, to check the boxes. But
Okay.
I think the big thing is knowing that, Arizona was already committed to it, and
Yeah.
we were always seeing, we saw it working with them, right?
Okay.
And the other thing then too is realizing that this is the start of a community. And I think it was one of the first EdFi summits that they had, and it was all of us in like a larger conference, or maybe 30 some of us. And the
Okay.
last summit, I don't know what the attendance was. It seemed like a couple hundred, right?
Yep.
And those in that room, though, starting out, were very committed to working with each other. And I knew that we wouldn't be doing this on our own. We would have someone to help out and ask questions too. And so we're forever grateful for those from EdFi that has helped us out, those who, like Brito from the Department of Ed in Arizona. At the time, the Tennessee Department of Ed was in this too. And between the three of us, we were really working together a lot. And then just seeing the community grow, and then we learned a lot through our implementation, as it was no state has the exact same implementation or the priority in which they're using EdFi, right?
Sure.
So since then we've had numerous conversations where we've been able to help other states out too, and it's been great. So
That's awesome.
Minnesota came and spent some time with us. We've been working with Indiana, things like that. So
I see Maureen popped into the chat. 500 plus at the last one. There you go.
Wow.
That's fantastic. Okay, so we're gonna look at some of the questions that have been asked in the chat. It looks like Melissa was able to answer Jim's around being able to collect data on statewide student attendance, whether it was in person or remote. And then there was another one that Jim had asked earlier, collecting device information. Are you also collecting information on vendors or solution providers used by districts? And then will you use the emerging LTD taxonomy and providers, the ULTIDs, to capture that information?
Yeah, I'll start out with capturing of devices. So one of the things we've been able to do with help of the EdFi community is this, was it last year at this time? Yeah, we put out the what we call our digital equity pieces in EdFi. So yes, we're collecting that information from school districts, which is huge for us as we are, advocating digital equity across the state, because we need to make sure that all kids have strong internet connection so they can do their work,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And it was amazing to me how, even in some urban areas where you would think that there's strong connection, how many kids don't have what they need to do their schoolwork, which seemed, pretty basic. So that was huge, and just to be able to get that out in the amount of time and the speed that we did. And it was also just amazing to see the vendor community respond to that and just say, yeah, we know this is a priority, we're going to make this happen. And before you know it, data is coming in. So that was really neat to see that happen. And then as far as, do we keep lists of the vendors that LEAs are using? We send out surveys every year to figure out, hey, who's your vendor? What are you using your vendors for? And is there anything else you want to add to the list that should be on our radar? Most recently, what we're doing now is we're really trying to gather the different vendors that are used, or software solutions that are used in school districts for their HR systems. Because right now what we call our Y staff application, it is still a file upload process, and we would love to incorporate that piece into our EdFi API as well. So we're trying to gather feedback on that, and then we will go out and start reaching to our vendors. So we have a Jada on our staff who's fantastic, and her full-time job is just wrangling in the vendor communication, and 100% always focused with that. So she hears the issues and the problems and the complaints from the vendors, and then advocates on their behalf for us to change things and make their lives easier. And then she hears from the LAAs what they need and advocates on their behalf so that we can, get vendors in the backlog, so that we can get more and more certified to do as an option to exchange data between school districts. Yeah.
Great. Folks, if you have questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. I'm going to ask my next question while we wait and see if anyone else has any. So I was part of the Biden-Harris transition team, and we had the chance to reach out to, I think it was around 5 different states. Wisconsin was actually one of those states, thinking about how they were capturing these data as far as looking at where students were, seeing if they were even keeping track of like different modalities of whether or not it was in person or blended or completely online. What has the benefit of having all of this kind of in place been for switching during the pandemic? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
So the benefit of being able to capture the data of like what we call our digital equity.
Yep.
Well, I think I can't answer a whole lot of that because I'm very in the operations of things, but
that's fair.
My boss, Kurt Kiefer, our CIO, and the others that are higher up, I know that data is invaluable to them. And my boss is on a governor's task force on broadband initiatives, and I would hope that the data that we're providing is helping provide decisions for new policy. So
yeah, that's great. Let's see, Susan has, what advice do you have for states considering the adoption of interoperable standards?
Advice is start slow and have a specific use case in mind. You look at the EdFi data model and you go, whoa, there's a lot here, and there is.
Yeah.
We took bite-sized pieces out of it, and we still aren't using everything today, right? There's still a lot out there we haven't touched. So.
Thank you. How might the American Rescue Plan or ARP funds be used to help continue this work to make it sustainable or scalable? Have you all thought about that?
We are having conversations as a state on our next plan for the ARPA funds. We are working through a state transition right now with our leadership. We have a new state superintendent starting July 5th. So we are still working on those conversations and haven't made any decisions yet, but we are definitely bringing to the table the data needs, the interoperability, the broadband and digital equity efforts, and what the funds could be used for, including the possible collection of the modality data, because we are not collecting that yet through EdFi. We have a project that we're starting to analyze, which I mentioned to Jim, on possibly collecting that starting with the 22-23 school year. But we don't have any set plans yet, but definitely in conversation.
Okay, great.
Us. Always happy to collaborate.
Well, I believe that our time is running short here. I want to give Susan enough time to come back on and say a thanks and everything. But any last words from the folks at Wisconsin with our folks that are here in the room with us?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about our story, and we're here to help out in any way, and always looking to move things forward.
Great. Thank you all for sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you so much to CETA for agreeing to co-host this webinar with us, for the Wisconsin DPI team. Every time I hear you guys talk about the work you're doing, I learn something new, and I'm just so impressed with how by investing in the infrastructure, you've been able to address challenges that might not even have been a consideration when you first started this project. I think it was 6 years ago. Am I right? Was it 6 years ago, Dan, that you started? And I just love the fact that you have now laid the foundation to address future challenges and to really proactively address challenges that districts are facing. I'm sure that school nurses across the state of Wisconsin are just cheering you all the time. So thank you so much for this work. Christine, if you just go to the next slide real quickly, just wanted to let you know this is the first in a series of state webinars that we are doing with CETA. So don't miss July 21st at 12 o'clock p.m. The next state in our Great Data States series will be Nebraska. And I know Christina's really looking forward to that, because those are her peaks from her time in Nebraska. So we are very excited. If you have registered for this webinar, you'll be on our mailing list. So I'll be getting registration information when that is available. So we hope that you'll consider joining us to hear about the great things happening in Nebraska. And the next slide. And again, we just want to thank you again for your interest in interoperability. This is a project, I think, that is well worth the investment. It's not a quick fix. I like to tell people, like interoperability, it's kind of like, as a former IT director, it's kind of like networks and servers and switches. It's like people weren't interested in the actual IT infrastructure because it's not sexy. They just wanted their Wi-Fi to work. And I just really appreciate the fact how by investing in your data infrastructure the same way that states and districts invest in your IT infrastructure, you are able to leverage that infrastructure to really address real challenges. And I just want to thank you for sharing your vision and the work that you're doing. So folks, we look forward to seeing you hopefully at our next webinar with the state of Nebraska. And thank you so much for joining us. And if you know folks who were not able to attend but might be interested, we will have a recording of the webinar and we will make it available so that others can learn. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at a future webinar.